Welcome back to Gamer in the Wardrobe, where I literally play games, TCGs, and video games in the comfort of my closet, as you can see. It's been a minute, Alpha Clashers. I was at Pro Tour, took a little vacation, and then I've been sick. So, good to be back. Want to start making more consistent content, not only for the community, but for you guys. Met a lot of awesome people at the Pro Tour, up your arsenal. Got to play against Mike Hamilton, Peter, a lot of the top guys in the TCG world. The Tampa Bay Clashers were awesome. All the teams I met, all the people, the Tavern Brawlers, everybody, the Vegas crew, the two brothers, the two big brothers that aren't brothers but are brothers. Appreciate meeting all you guys. Really had a lot of fun there, and I can't wait to see you guys again at the next event. Let's hop into the deck list because that's what I am here for. This is the deck I brought to Pro Tour. Mean Streak Boosted was a rogue contender, so to speak. He was definitely not on the S tier, A tier, or maybe even B tier list, but I felt really, really confident and comfortable with this. After the event, I feel like there are a couple of things I could have probably side decked differently or main decked differently to have a better turnout. But finished top 16 was Game 7, lost to Machina, lost to Carter out of Tampa. But had I won that match, I actually would have placed 5th and been in top cut and played on Sunday with this deck. So we're going to review some of the matchups, we're going to review the deck, and then I hope you guys enjoy the video. So first things first, let's go over the actual contender himself, Mr. Mean Streak Boosted. 25 health, alpha contender, blue contender, which is critical because we want to play that augmented reality blue clash buff, which we will talk about. He's a 1 attack, 0 defense contender, and has the ability at 25, clash cards you control with no streak counters get trigger attack, put 1 streak counter on this card. And then once per turn during your primary phase, you may engage your contender, this card, and remove 2 streak counters from among clash cards you control. If you do, draw 1 card. His second ability at 15 health, which is critical because it goes from 25 to 15, which is a really, really good health differentiation, which is only 10 health, right? But all clash cards your opponent control get -1, -0, and that's the static effect on your turn and your opponent's turn. I really like the green-white war deck that was aggro, swing, 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 go hard, try and kill your opponent quickly, and it draws while doing it. But what I didn't like about it was the second ability on war had no effect on the green-white war deck because you weren't generating any tokens, and then you also didn't, the one that I ran didn't run any clash buffs because it was green-white, not red. So when I was putting together this deck, I wanted to make a deck that went really fast with really easy curve, but also had the benefit of the clash buff while drawing very easily, and then having a second ability that was beneficial. And the -1, -0, I think, is an ability that a lot of people sleep on. So that's how I landed on this contender, and that's how I built this deck. So let's just kind of dive in. What we'll do first, we'll go over like the 1-drops, 2-drops, and we'll just kind of go up from there. And we will start with, we'll just start right over here, and we'll start with our normal 1-drop turn 1, Haven the Resourceful Helper, trigger enter, you may draw 1 card, and she's a 1/2 body. Really good turn 1 play, whether it's on your turn going first, or if you're going second. Gets you a body on the board, which can inevitably start swinging and getting streak counters, but it also draws you a card, so it replaces itself while still putting a body on the board. This is definitely a card you want in your starting hand. I would say you want as many of these in your starting hand as possible, because it's a very, very good card with how this deck synergizes. The next 1-drop is the Lyn, the Nanite Assassin. When it enters play, your opponent diminishes 1 card and you put a bounty on that card. If that card is defeated while this Lyn is on board on your turn, at the end of your turn, if 1 or more clash cards with the bounty are defeated, you may put target clash card with an initial resource cost of 2 or less from any Oblivion into your clash zone. So really cool card. You can ramp twice from it by pulling a Bountiful Collector out. You can draw from it. You can pull out a Krung. Really, really great card for this deck. Really valuable card just in the game. And everyone knows what it does, so I won't spend too much time on that as well. This is not a turn 1 play. I would not play this on turn 1. I usually would play this when I have an opponent or a clash card I can target with the bounty, or if I just want to be extremely aggressive and get my streak counters going so I can draw with my contender ability. This card, I think, is the MVP of the deck. when I decided on going with rogues, I knew it was going to be a lot of alphas and harbingers in the meta. And I wanted a clash ground that specifically did not buff harbingers or alphas. And that's where I landed with rogues, and that's where I landed with Detroit, because it only buffs rogues, which luckily I didn't really see a lot of, because I didn't think that was going to be the meta. So I was getting the buff where my opponent maybe 10% of the time was getting the buff with a random rogue they may have. Obviously, when I played against Machina and they were running the Lins, that Lin was getting buffed. But a lot of times when my opponents were playing Harbingers and Alphas, or minion tokens and things like that, they were not getting buffed. But this also has a really cool trigger enter ability where each player may reveal the top 3 cards of their deck. If they do, they may put a non-clash card with an initial resource cost of 3 or less from among them into their hand. Then put the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. So the strategy around this early game for this deck was, I want to find 1 or 2 Detroits in my starting hand. I want to find, 2 or 3 1-drop Havens, the Bound Haven, and then the 2-drop Haven. Specifically, you're hard mulliganing for the Haven the Bountiful to ramp. But ideally, if you have that already in your starting hand, you're looking for your Bound Haven to give you access to the blue and the white immediately for the resourcing, your 1-drop Havens, and then Detroit. I'm actually, and I'll explain this in a second, but yeah, this is really cool. It's a really cool card because it buffs your rogues +1 defense. And a lot of times what I found in this meta is at 2 defense, all of your cards can be obliterated from the board very easily with very little effort from your opponent. At 3 or more defense, it makes it a lot more difficult. So Detroit was really, really critical in making sure this deck operated and functioned well in the matchups I was going to be facing that were not Genesis, basically. Target list is the next 1-drop. This is just enters play, puts a bounty on a target clash card you don't control. And then whenever that clash card you don't control with the bounty is defeated, you may draw a card, ready a resource, target opponent diminishes 1 card. Really cool card. It gives you the blue opportunity. But going into this meta, I didn't really go up against a lot of clash cards that I was going to be defeating. So I feel like looking back at this, instead of having this as a main deck option, I could have had this as a side deck option for like a Krung matchup or a Machina matchup. Because going against Genesis, where he just doesn't play any clash cards until they're hard to remove or defeat, this card basically was automatically resourced because I didn't really need it in a lot of those situations. So that's one where I'll talk about in a second. Augmented Reality is our clash buff. You're ultimately using this to +0/+2 all of your cards and draw 2 cards. Really strong clash buff, which is kind of why I leaned into Mean Streak and this clash buff and this synergy, because I thought that clash buff was just really, really strong. Controlling the situation, I'm only running 2 of these. This may be a card where I'd want to run 3, but this is a really cool card because it's a counterplay trap. You may only activate this trap if an opponent plays a clash card. Engage a clash card you control. Target clash card being played enters play engaged. And the cool thing about this card is most of my clash cards are either engaged already or not on the board yet. So, and then I can use it as a target for Lin or opening up a lane so I can swing at the contender. But the uniqueness of this is that clash card my opponent plays is going to enter play engaged whether or not I can engage a card on my side of the field regardless, right? So really, really strong card. It slows down your opponent and it creates an opening or a target for you on your next turn. And it synergizes really well with this because Sacrificial Strength can ready stuff. You usually can have 1 or 2 resources active and up. So it's a really, really cool card to have, and I really got a lot of value out of it. Let's go. And that is it for our 1-drops. That said, we'll stop on our 0 cost, which is Sacrificial Strength, which is a really good topic at the moment because we just talked about controlling the situation. So I could have controlling the situation down and no resources up, but I could have this trap down as well. And this is a counterplay. Send a clash card you control to Oblivion and ready 2 cards on your resource zone. So in theory, right, my opponent plays something. Let's say I have like 4 guys on the board. They play something, I can send one thing to Oblivion, ready 2 of my resources, and then in that same phase use controlling the situation so that card enters the play engaged. So that was kind of the idea wrapped around this, is it gave me access to some traps that could be beneficial, but it also gave me access to Cybernetic Recall, which was my counter to Shocking Revelation, which I'll explain here in a second. But I really got a lot of value out of this card. I really enjoyed playing it. And a lot of times I can sack a card or 2 to play this card because I have so many on the board because I'm flooding the board. Let's go into our 2 drops, which our first one is going to be Cybernetic Recall. Now, looking back at this tournament, this is a card I should have ran 4 of, 3 or 4 of minimum, because at 2, I unfortunately just didn't see it in the times that I needed it, because this would have been a way to counter a lot of the Machina plays that I did in Game 7, and this would have also been a way to counter a lot of the Shocking Revelations had I just mapped it out better in my head and made sure that it was done properly. This has a counterplay quick, so it's not a trap. From your hand, counterplay, return all clash cards with an initial resource cost of 1 or less to their owner's hands. So, let's say I have 2 1-drop Havens, a Lyn, and a Haven the Bountiful 2-drop on board. My opponent decides the Shocking Revelation to get rid of everything. Well, let's say I have Sacrificial Strength down and no resources up. I can sack my 2-drop Haven, and then play Cybernetic Recall from my hand, counterplay, to return the 3 cards to my hand. So that's how this would kind of work. Unfortunately, I only landed it once, I think, in a lot of my matchups, because I was only running 2 of them. So this is a card I would have ran more of. The other thing that came in handy, or could have come more in handy, is in the Machina matchup. Because Machina likes to kill your small stuff and then bring it back with Lyn. And when he brings back from my Oblivion, I can Cybernetic Recall to return those cards to my hand. So, again, this is a card I think I undervalued, and I would have played 3 or 4 of instead of 2, because it would have come in a lot more handy if I had it in my hand in those opportune times. Next, we have Haven the Bountiful Collector. This is another miss I think I had from the Pro Tour. Instead of running 3, I would have ran 4. And this is just your ramp card. Trigger enter, you may put 1 card from your hand into your resource zone engaged. Extremely good card, should have ran 4, because when I don't drop this on turn 2 or turn 3, it's very hard for me to continue to keep up with my opponent if my opponent's ramping. If they're not ramping, I'm fine. But in this meta, 90% of decks are ramping, so if you're not ramping with them, you're going to be behind. And that was what I found with a lot of my matchups, was if I didn't hit this card and I didn't ramp efficiently, I just couldn't get to where I needed to be to close out the game. The games I did find this, I did really, really well. So that was a miss. I just, with the way this deck draws, I was hoping that I would find it relatively simply and easily, but I should have ran 4, not 3. Let's go to our 3-cost cards. Lyn the Nanite Warrior. This was mostly a torque counter. Again, if Detroit is on board, this is a 2/4 with close combat and interception. So ultimately, this is a card I could play, ram in the torque, ram into a low 2-drop, and just kill it. That was kind of the idea wrapped around this. And then having it stick around, because with Detroit it's a 2/4, it's hard to get rid of. What do we have next? Deliverance. This is another one I'm kind of on the fence with, because, you know, the way that my deck is built, it's going so fast. A lot of times, and a lot of times my opponent isn't really playing critical stuff that I need to remove. So this was a card that really just ended up resourced a lot of the times, or I'd have to save for like the big Genesis, or some of those Genesis that, you know, are really like the legendary ones. But again, by the time I needed to play this, I could have played 2 or 3 more Clash cards and try and, you know, gotten the damage in. So this is one that I'm still on the fence of. I think 2 is good, but a suggestion would be to try it with 0, and I'll kind of go over that when I do the recap here at the end. We have the Haven Quick-Witted Bound 3-drop. It's the white-blue resource. I run 2 of these because if you can find this in your starting hand or by turn 2, it really, really helps free up your game, because you can just leave this active most of the time with controlling the situation, Sacrificial Strength with your Clash buff in hand. It can make your hand a lot more versatile, because you can do your buff. You can do controlling the situation. You can do sacrificial strength, restand this, play controlling the situation, and a clash buff, right? So it just really, really helps the resource game. And that's why I was running 2, because I really wanted to find one in my starting hand, because it just makes life a lot easier. This is another card I think I could have side decked and played something different. This is the Lin taking aim. Your opponent diminishes 1 card for each bounty among them. And then when it obstructs, it puts a bounty on target clash card I don't control and gets +1/+1 for each bounty counter among clash cards you don't control. So in theory, this is a really good card against Krunk. But outside of that, a lot of the opponents I played, again, didn't play a lot of clash cards. Or if they did, they were like dying or whatever. And this card is really good. I like having 2 of them just in case and in the Krung matchup. But I think this is a card I could have side decked for maybe more beneficial matchups, knowing that the meta was going to be ramp and very less clash card heavy until endgame. And that goes through our 3 drops. Our 4 drop. This is one of my favorite cards from the new set. It's the Clarity Omniscient Envoy. And trigger enter. If your opponent has at least 5 health or more than your contender, this card gets +0/+2. Doesn't happen too often because you're going so fast, but when it does, it's nice. But then foretell 2 cards and draw 1 card. So one of the big things is that second ability, the then foretell 2 and draw 1, happens whether you're under 5 health of your opponent or not. So that is something that happens. So this is a trigger enter. Imagine this being a trigger enter, foretell 2, draw 1 card. That's really good, but it also has the opportunity to be a +0/+2, and then it has a trigger defeat where it buffs all of your rogues and alphas and gives them +1/+1 and undisputed. So since I'm running all rogues, that made sense, and since I want to draw a lot, that makes sense, and since this is only 4 and I'm going to ramp to it, it's really good. And if I have Detroit on, it's a 4/5 or a 4/7 if it gets the buff from its trigger enter ability. So this card, huge value, hard to get rid of, hits hard, and has a trigger defeat upside. So I really like this card. Really thought that it was a really good value for what I was trying to do with my deck. This was a very cool card as well. I loved this card. Mostly I leaned into this instead of the Genesis and instead of the T-Bone because it was a rogue, but also because it only cost 1 blue pip. So in that early game, I try to make sure to have up enough resources so that I can have my clash buff and buff my stuff +2 health so they survive and draw 2. So with Detroit, this is a 5/4. I can swing this, and then if they try to kill it with something that can hit it for 4, since I usually would play this for 1 blue and 3 white and leave a blue up so that I could then protect all of my cards, not just this one, with my clash buff and draw 2. So, and again, it gets the buff for rogues, which is really, really good. Let's go to the 5 costs. The Lin Adaptable Fighter, 5/5 Flyer, 5/6 Flyer if you have Detroit on, which actually helped me in the Koggin matchup. They played a Koggin, got rid of one. I had Detroit on the board. They swung with it. Next turn, I played out Lin, swung at the Koggin, killed it because it's a 5/5 and this is a 5/6, right? This also synergizes really well with our Chao Ling special summon, where you can special summon it for free if you send a 5 cost or more to Oblivion. So really good way to get some tempo, get some aggro, return a target accessory back to the top of an opponent's deck. And that was a really cool combo that I found synergized really well, and they're all rogues, which is cool. Our legendary is Genesis the Inevitable, 5-drop, 3 blue pip. Again, finding that Bound Haven is really cool because it allows you to play this on curve while still playing other expensive cards on curve for that same amount of type of pip resource. This is undisputed, unrivaled, and it has a trigger defeat, goes into your resource zone, and then it adopts the abilities among all clash cards in play. So this card in play has flight, would give Genesis flight. This card in play would give Genesis close combat and interception. So that was kind of the thought around a lot of these additional cards here, was I was going to be able to benefit and bump my 5-drop Genesis to make him stronger and harder to get rid of. And then lastly, the Clarity 6-drop Foreseeing Fate. It's exclusive. Trigger enter, it's a 4/5 body, 4/6 with Detroit Rogue. Trigger enter. rogues or alphas you control get +2/+0 until the end of turn. So if I can buff all of my rogues, which every clash card in my deck is a rogue, everything on my board is getting a +2/+0 bump, including this. And then I also get to look at the top 2 cards of my deck, draw one into my hand, and put one on the bottom every single turn. So it's a draw engine, it buffs my cards that one time, it's a rogue, it's extremely strong, and it's tough to get rid of as a 4/6. So that's the deck in a nutshell. The side deck, I had another Deliverance just in case there was a pesky card I needed to get rid of, Ancient Protection in case I came up against a lot of accessories that were tough, like interfering with the process or Crimson Scales, things like that. Another Controlling the Situation if I felt like they were playing really high value clash cards and I wanted to make sure I had that down and ready to go. Vanny's Groceries buffs my blue cards and then will allow me to draw a card. This is actually kind of a fun one. I'll read this one. It buffs all blue cards +1 attack, but if I have 1 or more bounty on an opponent clash card, they diminish 2. If I have 2 or more street counters among clash cards I control, I draw 1, and then the last one doesn't really matter. So the idea would be is if I have a bounty on them and I've swung twice and have 2 street counters on my cards, I could then play Vannies, they diminish 2, I draw 1, and then all of my blue cards, all blue cards in general, get +1 attack. So I really kind of use this if my opponent was abusing Clash Grounds. I didn't find really many issues only running the 4 with Detroit, but if they were running like a lot and they were really impactful, I would swap Vannies in for something to make sure that I could offset that Clash Ground war. I also have the 4-drop Genesis that when it defeats goes into your resource. And then this was just silly. I don't know why I put this in here. This was more of a Krung counter, Visions of the Future Clash Ground. Flip all traps face up, then target Earth Clash card you control gets +1/+1 for each face-up trap in play until end of turn. Most of my cards are Earth Clash cards, so the idea would be in a Krung matchup, which I only saw one, Tampa Steve, you're awesome. This would then buff that card, but and the idea would be, the ideal target would be the Lin, right? So if he has like 4 or 5 face-down Clash cards, I play that, it reveals 4, Lin's on board, Lin now becomes a 9/9 or a 9/10 if Detroit's on board. So that was kind of the idea wrapped around it when I was building this deck and how it would work. So I'm going to pause for 1 second, be right back. And we're back. So that's the deck breakdown, that's the side deck. A couple of things I would have done differently. First thing, what I would have done, I would have taken this out of my side deck and probably taken the Deliverance out of my side deck. Probably the Deliverance and the Controlling the Situation and the Visions of the Future. I would have put 2 target lists into my side deck. And probably these 2 3-drop Lins. I would have bumped up Haven to 4. I would have bumped up Clarity to 4. And I would have bumped up Cybernetic Recall to 4. So if I were going to remake this deck, it would be 4 Haven Bountifuls, 4 Clarities, 4 Cybernetic Recalls, and then no target list, take out target list and take out the Lins. If I felt like there was a flex spot, it would be Deliverance. Depending on how fast I want to go, I could take those out or just have 1 in my deck and then swap something else in. But that's kind of the deck list in a nutshell. Let's go over the matchups from Pro Tour, because I know that's what you guys all want to hear about, right? So my first matchup was against David A., and David was playing Magnate Indomitable, green-blue, basically Sacrificial Strength with green flyers. Indomitable Magnate, I felt pretty comfortable going into this matchup because a lot of his stuff goes offline if I have 3 or more Clash cards on the board. And I think in both of the games, by like turn 2, I already had 3 Clash cards. And then I would just let him stand there. Part of the hard thing was, though, is his contender is a 2/0, and he has the Clash buff that is Dragonheart, which gives him +2/+2, which turns him into a 4/2. So swinging into him could be difficult. So they were longer games because I was having to kind of build up my board to make sure that my swings would be impactful. But I felt rather comfortable. It was a little awkward because he wasn't playing a lot of Clash cards, and he kept buffing his contender. But ultimately, we came out with a 2-0 win. Round 2, I played against Taylor. He was playing Genesis with the Lin package, and he was trying to do like a bounty diminish Lin. And I think my deck was just a little bit quicker, a little bit more aggressive, and a little bit higher attack. So when he was trying to kind of set his stuff up, he was also having to defend against my aggressiveness. which ultimately turned into a 2-0 victory for me there. Round 3, I played against a local here in Vegas, Chief Lau, and he was running Torque, and he has been running Torque since, I think he started in the game, and they were extremely close matchups. I believe he actually won. I went first game 1, I think, and he won. And then I won game 2, and it was a little bit longer and dragged out. And then we went to turns on game 3, and I just hit the nuts and was able to squeak out an overtime win in game 3 to get the victory, which put me at 3-0 for the tournament. And that was where I ran into some pretty tough competition. Ran into Michael Hamilton in round 4. He was playing green-white Genesis, which was more of a stall Genesis with Victory Peak, Shocking Revelation, and a big card that really helped him in our matchup was Sacred Banishment. But ultimately, in Game 1, I think I had a couple of misplays. I overextended knowing that Shocking Revelation was going to be coming out, and I didn't have Cybernetic Recall, so I kind of goofed up there. But I think in this matchup against Hamilton, I probably got Shocking Revelation 5 or 6 times in 3 games, which is very, very demoralizing. Because not only do they wipe your board, they resource or draw a card, and then they get to take your highest threat card. They get to see your hand, all of it, and then take a card from it that is really, really strong or could help you. So they were taking my Clash buffs out, which was limiting my draw. They were taking out my Flyers, which were limiting some of my aggression. So that's why if I were to go back, I probably would run more of the Cybernetic Recall so that I could get some of those 1-drops back into my hand to allow me to basically rebuild my board up right after that, or to return my board so that the Shocking Revelation wasn't as impactful. But that was also tough. Looking back on this matchup as well is I needed to have more ramp. Obviously going in the Genesis, they're going to ramp, they're going to do their things. But I think if I was able to get those Havens a little bit early on and ramp a little bit faster, because game 1 was long and it was kind of close. I think he ended at like 8. When he killed me, he was at 8 health. I ended up 9. And then game 2, I think I killed him on turn 5 because I hit all my nuts. I ramped, I aggroed him, and then he couldn't Shocking Revelation me enough times to kill me, which is where I got game 2. And then game 3, he just ramped for days. And again, Sacred Banishment is the trap that returns the card you played back to the top of your deck. And there was a turn where I played out my Legendary, and I knew he had it, and I totally forgot that he had it, and he played it. And then he drew a couple more cards and had another one face down, so whatever I played out the next turn would have just went right back. And I think I only have 5-drop, 5-drop, and 6-drop in my hand because he used Shocking Revelation to take out my Clash buff, so I couldn't draw. So his control definitely did a wonder, which made me consider making sure I have 4 Haven Bountifuls, making sure I have Cybernetic Recall. I don't know if that matchup would have went any different, but that was who I played, and then I went down to 3-1. And then right after you play the number 1 ranked player, you got to play the number 2 ranked player. So I went from Michael Hamilton straight to Peter, ended up 2-1 again, very similar situation, but Peter was playing blue-green, and the thing that was really hurting me in this matchup was Lefty's Last Stand. So it was really hard for me to do consistent damage because he could always have Lefty's Last Stand up. So I aggroed him down a couple times, but it just unlocked all of his stuff. And then, again, I think in this matchup, he Shocking Revelation me like 6 times. So that's where Cybernetic Recall could come in handy. Or maybe I could potentially swap out Oh, that was one thing. Instead of running... What is happening? Instead of running these 3-drop Lins for 2, I may even consider running the 2-drop Lin, the 3-2 Lin for the aggressiveness, but also draws a card if there's a bounty. That was another card I would consider if I want to be even a little bit more aggressive, which I think could have potentially helped me in this matchup as well. So after this loss, I went down to 3-2, and then I played Tampa Bay Steve. Awesome guy, really enjoyed playing against the Tampa team. Hopefully you guys are watching this and you like and comment and subscribe, but your Krung was fantastic to play against, really challenging, put me in some really awkward situations. This one kind of hurt my heart a little bit because we ended up going to game 3 and there was a lot of tough decisions and it went to time, and then I was having trouble making some decisions with what I wanted to do with Necrotic and what he had on the board, and it's just not how I wanted the match to end. Luckily, I was on the right side of the inconvenience in that matchup, so I do apologize about that, Steve. I do want a rematch next time because I feel like you and I were both robbed from a fantastic match due to time, and I would have loved to see how that third game ended. But after this, I ended up 4-2, which led me into another Tampa Clasher, Carter. And I would say amongst all of my matchups, obviously Genesis is going to be tough because he's the meta deck, control deck. He's good, he ramps, whatever. But I would say another tough matchup for my deck is Machina. So my 4-2 match going up against Carter, I ran into his Machina, which was green-blue, and he played it extremely well. And ended up, and again, this is another one where if I had a Cybernetic Recall in my hand, it could have potentially changed the game very easily in this matchup. So two of my toughest matchups, Genesis and Machina, ran into 3 Genesis and a Machina, and I feel like, hold on. Okay, I'm back in. I feel like if I had that Cybernetic Recall in some more of these matchups or more consistently, I could have potentially been more favored, right? So that was the event. This match, actually, what you can see in the rankings is I was 4-3 with a 67.35 opponent win percentage. And as you can see from amongst a lot of these top dogs here, it was one of the harder opponent win percentages. I lost to number 1 and number 2, and then I lost to Carter, who finished 12th in that game 7. So had I potentially won and went 5-2, I believe I would have slotted right in here, depending on pairings and matchups, either 5th or 6th place. But Carter smashed my dreams, unfortunately, but they were good games. So appreciate meeting everybody. This is the Mean Streak boosted deck. Talked about some of the things that I would potentially change going into another tour or event, but I really had fun with this deck. I wanted to show up with something spicy, and I think I delivered. So if you guys are still watching, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Let me know if we met at the show, and don't be afraid to throw some stuff down there of hey, I want to see this or I want to see that, because again, I'm going to try to come out with more content here in the future. So I appreciate you guys, and I will talk to you soon. Peace out.